Well, hello everyone. We are gathered here today for another Not Estuary, taking the Not Estuary brand because Chad has relinquished the throne. And it's not an estuary because we are using the estuary protocol, but I put a prerequisite on the conversation ahead of time, which is we have to pitch a topic related to parenting. So tonight's topic is parenting, and specifically parenting in 2025, or the end of it's almost 2026. So this will be like a little snapshot in time, see how well our advice holds up. But I think all of us on this call are fathers, and I think we are each and all grappling with what it means to be parents, what it means to be fathers in today's day and age, and yeah, and recognizing that it's not an easy task, and it's better to do hard things not alone, but with people that we trust are good people, good influences. So we are here today, and we're going to start off with Mr. Meow over there
Meow
in the
meow.
top right corner, and Mr. Thompson can give a quick intro, pitch his topic. We'll go from there.
Oh, intro. Introducing myself. My name's Luke. I have three kids. They're all teenagers. It's the teenage years have been a challenge in their own unique way. I think my pitch would be I want to do like a little shift in the pitch because normally I was thinking about we're talking about parenting and technology all the time. My wife and I talk about it kind of constantly, but I was thinking instead of the negative aspects of technology, I would love to think and contemplate what could be positive aspects of technology in parenting. And kind of in the same way that we trample down the algorithm by the algorithm in YouTube and TLC land. Maybe maybe we can figure out how to, grok that or gamify technology to help parenting.
Thank you, Luke. Mr. Dan.
All right, I'm Dan, live in Virginia. I'm a triple girl dad. Got a 3, a 9, and an almost 14. And one of the topics I was considering, I have two that I'll just kind of throw out there, and whatever sticks, sticks. That's fine. Um, but how do we teach our children to discern the spirit of the age, to recognize and discern the spirit of the age at any given time? So that's one. That's one option, and then the other is just what was helpful to you in your upbringing? Like, what is the most salient thing that was helpful in the way that your parents brought you up, and or what wasn't? And kind of what are our metrics for knowing health as we're parenting? Because sometimes you do things and it's like it was the right thing, but it didn't feel like it at the time. And other times, it's vice versa. And like, when are we measuring? Are we measuring like in the eschaton, looking back at everything? Are we measuring now? Um, because I find myself constantly kind of like running those simulations to the extent that I can. All right, so those are my ideas.
Thanks, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Gray.
Sorry, my layout's different than yours, so I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure who's
Same.
next. Uh, I'm Gray. I somewhat new to the corner, but thankfully have met all you guys here. Happy to be here with you guys. I have one child, a about to be 8-month old daughter this coming week, and I guess my entry into the corner of the last few months, at least in terms of being actively involved, has been largely revolved around um, conversations I've been having with Jordan Hall and then Annie Crawford, the last few, centered around education, which is, I think one a more specific frame within the frame that you provided, Neil, for of parenting, how best to guide my daughter, how best to raise her up. I feel um, well, we can get into this later, but I think I'm keenly aware of the many ways in which my childhood, the good and the bad, and I feel a lot of pressure, I think, to do it better for my daughter. And so my pitch would be um, honestly the opposite of that, which is I was just thinking about this while I was doing dishes 20 minutes ago. Um, I I wonder, I guess I would ask what the role of humility is in being able to, like in a Petersonian sense, go to the depths to retrieve the good from maybe you could call it specifically our fathers, but our family of origin, and even further generations back, to retrieve that good and what responsibility we have to do that in humility to then pass that on. Um, and for some, it might be easier. I think for a lot, it's probably very difficult. And so, um, yeah.
Cool. Thanks. We'll go to Nick and then Christian, Risto, and Zep.
What's up, boys? My name's Nick, aka Free Rillian. I am a father of two who are currently out and about, but one is in the oven. So that's exciting. Um, the out and about, I have a 4 and a 2 year old girl and a boy. That's exciting. My pitch, I'm gonna do sort of like I'm try to throw, I'm gonna try to throw a few leftovers together and see if I can't make a dish happen for the night. Um, So one thing we've talked about, someone else might pitch more directly, but I'm just going to bring in here briefly. Um, like an agentic versus an arenic approach, right? Like arenic approach, like you've got all these ideas, like I'm never going to blank and I'm always going to blank, those aren't bad, right? By the way, like I'll never send my kids to blank and I'm going to make sure they have this curriculum and they're in this place. That's more arena focused, right? That's not a bad thing. But then once you get in it, you got to be your options might shrink, or that thing that you said you might never do, there might be an okay option somewhat nearby, and like you need a little extra cash, so like might both have to work, and so shifting to like more agentic focus, which I think anyway. I won't get into my points here because you guys have said some really good stuff, but what I wanted to tie in with that was this almost like this fail safe mechanism, um, that maybe it's the main way to live that I like still sticks out to me from my days in the charismatic church, which is just like crazy things can happen when you just go, I'm going to trust God every step I take, which I know you can do with planning. And so really that's my pitch, is the balance between trusting God with every step you take and going, this might not be ideal, but we're going to choose this and still believe for the best. Balance between that and this like arenic, creating an ideal scenario within which your children can grow up in, which I think everyone does to some degree. But I guess my topic would be that dynamic itself. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I've got on my mind tonight.
Cool. Christian.
Hey, Christian Baxter. I have a YouTube channel in this corner of the internet. Um, I've got 3 kids, 15, 12, and 8. The 15-year-old will be 16 next month. Um, 2 girls and a boy. I mean, I didn't have anything, but the thing that I just was thinking about was because when I made that shift into thinking about my daughter turning 16 is rites of passage, just kind of as a general topic, and so I'll just go with that.
Cool. Thank you. Risto and then Zep.
Hi, Risto or Christopher. Risto's the middle part of Christopher. Um, and I have 4 kids. So I think I said my daughter's age wrong before, but 19 to 13. I have trouble keeping track of their ages. And I can tell you how not to be a good father. Um, I think fatherhood is like gardening, and it takes a while for the fruit to show up. So I'm in the fruit part of my life for several things, but parenting is one of them. And I think there's some good things, but also some things where I'm like, oof, I did a shitty job with that. Um, I really like kind of what Dan said of like pointing back to people who did a good job with their gardening by their examples. And it might maybe isn't like your direct father, but we have other people who father us and help guide us. Like my grandfather died this past year, and many people said like he was the best man they ever knew. So, I mean that's a weighty thing, inspiring but weighty. But he did many things well in his gardening.
Mr. Zepp.
All right, I'm John Zepp. I'm the youngest of 8 kids. So I came from a huge Catholic family. My parents were silent generation. I'm Gen X. I have 3 kids, 24, 21, and 19. I grew up in the Midwest. Um, my pitch is I've had a thought for a while, and I owned a business. I used to tell my employees all the time that this stupid phrase, but I like it, is necessity is necessary. And what I mean by that is when kids are little, babies, kind of like what Nick was saying, it's more arenic focused as a parent. Like at first their mother is their arena, even after they're born, and then it slowly gets bigger. But then at a certain point, it needs to shift your parenting. This is really similar to what Nick was saying, from being arenic to more agentic, like you're trying to make the kid grow up and embrace their own ability and agency. And uh, that's when necessity becomes necessary. If they don't have any needs, if they don't have anything that they need to do because you've provided everything, they don't grow. And that's one of the hardest things as a parent, is to let them need something, you know, and how that's really necessary for their growth. Uh, and yeah, I think I'll just leave it there.
That's really good. Thanks, John. Yeah, so I'm Neil. I just have one daughter. She's 9 years old. And my pitch is, and it's very similar to Zepp, yours, and a couple other folks, but parenting in phases where, we have this arbitrary cutoff called 18, where suddenly you're an adult and you go from like full authority as a parent to no authority as a parent. And I think that's a very weird thing, very unnatural. And so my pitch is like parenting in terms of phases where you have full control over everything that happens, and that's like a baby stage, and then you're the primary agentic controller, and that's when they're a smaller child, and then as they're I think this is where my daughter is now, like still have primary control, but she has a lot of agency in how she chooses to spend her time. Like I'm not choosing her hobbies, I'm not choosing like how she relates to her friends, all that. Um, and then moving to eventually to a phase where your kids are your friends, and that happens at some point. I don't know when that actually happens. And then the final stage is like being able to be taken care of by your kids, and being able to relinquish that control. And so, like, how does parenting work in those phases, and how do we get because this is something I think about. How do we get our kids to the point where at that cutoff of 18, where we don't have control, that um, that it's not a big deal. That they just pass that line and it's just fine. They go on with their lives. And the other terrifying aspect of that is like the combination of like zero control at 18 and then they go full blown into an arena that many of us think is completely anathema to the virtues and the values that we care about. So it's like, you have full control over your life and now go into this place where it's like the greatest temptations of your life are abounding and during this extremely formative time in children's lives. And I say children even though they're over 18 because their brains are still developing. So I think about that a lot. I think about the thresholds of cell phone and I think about the threshold of college. And those are the two thresholds that I'm like, yeah, man. So anyway, that's my pitch. Um, Now we get to pointing. I don't have fancy, like, I can't over Zoom. I can't do like the fancy graphics for pointing, but I think we started with Luke. So we'll start with Luke and we'll go around the horn.
Um, all right. I mean, I think there's kind of a thread already. I suppose I will uh I think we're gonna weave in. I think we're gonna end up talking about the inheritance of what our parents gave us and grandparents and our kind of familial heritage of parenting. That's gonna come in, generational sins, all that stuff, or and generational strengths, I suppose. But I would probably point to kind of the general theme of uh, arenic and agentic and the phases as kids age and how you have to parent them differently. Yeah. Relinquishing control, like all that.
All right. I'm going to give that point to Nick. Point to one person. Por favor. All right. Um, I forget who was next because we mixed up the order. I think it was Gray. No, it was either Dan or Gray. I think it was Dan.
Yeah, I think it's me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna point to John's.
Sorry, to who?
That
Oh,
To
John.
John's.
oh, John. Gotcha, gotcha.
Good job
Cool.
pointing, Dan. Good job following the directions and the protocol appropriately.
All models are false.
Lou prophesied.
Gray.
Um, I will point to Nick.
I think we're on. Is it Nick or Seabax? Yeah,
No, it's Nick.
Nick.
I'm gonna I'm gonna point to Dan. What he said about reflecting on your own upbringing and what was important to you. That I did not expect that at all in this little pitch session, and that stuck out to me.
Yeah, Christian.
I feel like there's Neil, yours and mine kind of were together with the rites of passage type stuff, and there was another. Some of that was with the agent and arena stuff too, but I think I think I'll go with the kind of how Luke did with Dan's with about kind of what you were given and maybe on the opposite what you weren't given theme. I don't wherever that was coming from.
Cool. Um, let's see who's left. Risto and John, I think, right? Wait, Gray, did you point? Yeah, I've got short-term memory problems. Risto
I'm going to point to Dan.
Ooh.
and John.
I'm going with Dan too.
Marino.
Yeah, I was gonna
We're
point to. I'm
touching.
gonna point to Nick, but it doesn't matter because Dan wins. So, all right, Dan, lay out some more thoughts. Paint the vision. We'll go from
Okay,
there.
is that how this works?
Yeah.
All right.
I love the Young Life shirt, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank
Awesome.
you. I actually met my wife through Young Life, so I'm
Awesome.
eternally indebted.
Love it.
Yeah, so all right, I got to remember my pitch. I mean, it was identifying the spirit of the age and also, but mainly looking back kind of like on what worked for us and what we want to reproduce and what we don't. Um, didn't expect to win the pitch, I'll be honest, but I'm glad that it resonated. Um, my dad modeled working hard. That's something that I remember. Um, and he's deceased now, so sorry, I'm just kind of like thinking about some of this stuff. It's funny, like a lot of my peers kind of are in that. We're talking about stages for a second, like getting to know their parents as adults, kind of more as peers. Um, and my father passed like 11 years ago, so I kind of just missed that. But I do a lot of retrospecting about that. Um, yeah, so I'll be honest, like some of the negative stuff is what's just bubbling up now. That's why this is a little bit tough. Um, and like my wife and I, we talk a lot about like how to do things right, and we try hard. Maybe we try too hard. I don't know. We probably worry too much. Um, but like my folks were like very, very free range. Kind of, it was a little bit generically evangelical. I don't want to say moralistic because it wasn't. There's more of an emphasis on like don't do sins of commission. There wasn't much emphasis on like an awareness of what would sins of omission look like. What does it mean to cultivate virtue? So like we've enrolled our kids in like a classical school, and that's been a really good experience. It's a little bit hard to pass on something that wasn't passed to you in the first place. You know, I, I had unlimited television and candy essentially growing up. You know what I mean? Uh, the land of sweets, and and that hasn't been without its consequences. Um, so that's something we're trying not to reproduce, and I hope that we're not like going to make moralists out of them. I hope that we're not going to make um, people that are really legalistic. Um, Identifying the spirits of the age was lacking. Um, Again, it was just kind of like do this, don't do this, but the why wasn't there, and like the do this, don't do that is great for I think really little kids. But kind of going back to what you were saying, Neil, with these stages, you kind of need to you read the Bible story and it's super simple and it has like a 40,000 foot interpretation. You know what I mean? But then the kid's going to carry that with them, and you have to like go back to that story, and you have to kind of peel back a layer, and you have to keep doing that, I think. And so I kind of feel like I was given those first layers, and it was great. Like I love the Bible stories, and I think that real seeds were planted, and God was faithful, like with those mustard seeds. Um, but kind of like pulling into the gardening metaphor, like you got to harden off those plants. Like you start them, and that's great. You really baby them. You give them water, you give them light, but then we got to put them out for a couple hours every day, and we got to let them feel the cold a little bit. Because eventually they're going to get put into who knows what environment, you know. Um, yeah, so I might have to circle back for like some of the positive stuff because there was a lot that was like it was a loving home. I never doubted if my parents loved me, and that's more than a lot of people can say, I'm sure. So yeah, definitely not here to beat up on mom and dad, but um, yeah. So I'll pass it off to somebody else for a minute. We'll come back.
I felt the same way. Like loving home, definitely. But my dad was quite a bit older, and he was pretty stern, pretty disciplinarian type of person. And when I was younger, I told myself I didn't want to be like that. Right? Uh, I wanted to be. In an effort to be my own man, I would go away from that. But then I just realized that my my actions are still based on his actions. So I'm being reactionary. So I'm not really my own man. That was an early lesson I learned. Like, oh, well, whoops. But and that was really just a focus on the negative, which, like you're saying, I don't want to really do that either. But uh, as that was one of my early lessons in myself. Probably before I even had kids, I had to think that through.
Hmm.
I
One thing that I, oh, go
you
ahead.
gonna you got some? Go,
Go
Christian.
ahead. Okay,
Okay, I'll
go
go.
ahead.
Um,
Oh,
so you go. I I love this topic. I mean, this is a frequent thing that I'll go into with my streams because what I was thinking as we were talking and as you guys were just talking is whatever. I mean, it's the Luke bingo, but like everything's a gift if you receive it as a gift. So something I've said often about my dad because it was the same thing. He was a very stern man. Like he's kind of I could talk about a lot of stories from my dad growing up because it's just my upbringing is probably, I mean, in some ways, kind of unbelievable. To my dad says that kind of stuff all the time. Like he'll tell stories of our life growing up, and he's like, people don't believe me, like of the kind of stuff that we did and what we went through, and so life was pretty hard. And I remember, I mean, I've processed a lot of this stuff actually in just recent years. It's taken a really long time because the kind of parent I think that I am, uh, I don't know that it was reactionary to my parents. Probably to some degree it was, but I'm just kind of it's a generational thing too. Like Dan, you were talking about this. My wife and I, for example, are both very, my wife especially, like we're just incredibly intentional. My wife's constantly reading books, constantly thinking about how we can best parent. We talk about it all the time, and I think my parents thought about almost never the best way to parent kids, you know? Um, and it's kind of like it is that thing. There are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. Like, is this better or worse? Well, I mean, I don't know. It has strengths, but then it has weaknesses. And I didn't watch it, but this TED Talk came up the other day that was just like, if you want to motivate your children, like the tagline was just like, do nothing. And which is which is amazing. That's kind of like what that's the agentic, right? Increasing as they go on, like those little plants that you're babying as children and training, and you give them all these laws and rules, but the law is a school teacher to grow you into maturity. Like I've often said with my son, I can give him all these rules, but if he's not doing these things of his own by nature as he gets older, like it's not, if he's just following rules, that's not a good thing. And uh, I don't know. It's like my parents, they gave me lots of good things. They gave me, like I was thoroughly Bibled. Like the Bible just was all the time, everywhere. Bible memorization, Bible stories, Bible reading, personal devotionals. It was just, it's such a deep part of who I am. It's just like it's in there, comes out all the time. And like, and I don't know that we gave our kids that. And part of it goes into what I was talking about. It's the collapse of, a lot of it's the collapse of community and culture. And because we live, like my family isn't from out here, so we don't live next to my family. And so you're kind of living in isolation. And so then how do you, like my dad also gave me really strong work ethic, but a lot of that was like, but I hated it. Like for all of my life, I hated it because he was just like, that's the one gift he kind of wanted to give his boys in particular was like you're gonna know how to work, and he was very successful in that, and I think we're all thankful for that, but like there was a lot of things that came with that, thing like I've never been willing to be as hard as my dad was in certain ways with my kids, because I just and part of that, I don't know, part of it's, I feel like I've talked about it, but like part of it's laziness too, because like I don't, like even I've been working on these patios and like I get like there's no way if I was a high school kid, like I would have been out helping my dad. Like it wouldn't even have been a question. Like it would have been mandatory. And part of it is laziness on my own part. Part of it is just like I don't want to like slow down and teach you how to do things because I'm just trying to get it done. I also don't want to argue with you about like all that stuff that my dad went through. I don't want to do that with you. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm giving my kids a lot different gifts, but I don't know what it is because um, we're so like we care so much about what our kids think and talking about things. That's actually probably one of the things I would change about doing things with kids is I wouldn't explain things nearly as much to them. I wouldn't give them nearly as many whys because it's sometimes I worry about this with my kids is like they're always because that's a lot of our arguments is they'll get it they want like I didn't argue with my dad ever because I was afraid of him. You know, like it wasn't even on the table. And my kids in talking about all this stuff a lot. I think there's a detriment to there's probably a benefit, but there's also a detriment to talking about these things a lot. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it there. So I've been talking a lot.
I'll just pick up where you're talking about the why. I was curious, still am curious person, and that was what got me in the most trouble was asking that question. And so it's like, oh, well, I'll over explain things to my kids because I, they didn't give me like maybe a logical or rational reasoning for lots of things, like dad, okay, you only want me to listen to Christian music, but when I bring this band home, you don't like the way it sounds, so now I can't listen to this band. I need you to explain why. Like that was kind of you didn't have a lot of logic. It was just like, oh, that just sounds evil. That just sounds bad. And of course that's a whole there was Skillet Gate on Twitter this week if any of y'all saw that, um but yeah, that was not the freedom to there wasn't a lot of freedom in a similar way that Luke you were describing. I grew up pretty myself. And so when there's that level of stress for in a sense survival, to some degree, it's like there's not time or energy to answer those questions. And you understand that now as a 40-year-old person, but then my wife, I can't remember who the kind of American, African American, maybe it's Maya Angelou. She has a story, I think it's her, where she got sent off with her sibling to go live with like an uncle or an aunt or some, and there's somewhere where there's a suitcase involved and it's a heavy suitcase, and there was a question about why. And are we doing this? Why are we moving? Why are we having to change this? And the uncle or whoever it was said, can you pick up that suitcase?" And she couldn't pick it up. And he said, "There's some things like you're not ready for until you're ready, until you can handle it." And I just love that illustration related to being a curious person and then thinking about my own son. Like I felt bad this week. Like I took my son out to dinner and he's in a really enchanted and magical age at 8, and like he was asking some questions and I just kind of it was kind of one of those things I didn't have the energy, and it probably triggered some kind of trauma response, to use the psycho language. But it's like I kind of unloaded a little bit on him and it took all the magic out of the air, and I just gave him a hard dose of reality. And I just afterwards I kind of he was upset. I just felt really gross after that. Like he's only you begin to understand he's only this young for we were all only that young for a little while. And then there is reality will hit you whether your dad tells you when you're 8 or not. It's gonna happen. And I just yeah, that was a moment recently that I wish I could take back, but because I kind of gave him something that was probably too heavy for him to handle, like to the suitcase, was too heavy. And so uh but I think about that a lot in relationship to how we communicate to our kids and what we were given in that kind of generational handoff. I think when my parents, I mean, similar to Luke, my parents, we did the A. Well, it's funny because I was telling my dad, man, I look back now and there was a lot of catechism, a lot of catechesis in the house. You bought these New Testament video series, and I would watch those like all the time. We had other videos, and we did scripture memory around the kitchen table, like, and I haven't done anything that like in intense with my kids in that way. And there are all the same critiques that have been mentioned about like legalism. That was a big part, and so there's like a reaction against that, like, oh, the some of the that intensity I'm not going to thrust upon my kids, and then I'm like, man, did I have I given them enough? And um, and so I think they did us, and I was telling my dad, y'all did good with that, and he goes, we didn't know what we were doing, Dad, Christian, we didn't know what we were doing, and I just was like, yeah, um, so there's lots of good, lots of bad, um, all wrapped up for us in religion. So much of it related to how we were raised. We talk about Big Eva in the 2010s and stuff, but like we were little Eva in the 80s, like right, like the whole time. So that was our life.
I'll jump in. No one else is going to. So to Dan's pitch was kind of two-parted, so I'll respond to both parts. The discerning the age. As someone who's predisposed towards anxiety, being pretty neurotic, the it's been beneficial because I have to find solutions. Otherwise, I just rely on my anxiety. And scripture is pretty mum, or not as elaborative on certain topics that you think it would be, and parenting is one of those. Like it's pretty. There's not a lot scripture has to say about parenting. Like teach your kids to obey, which is a whole other topic that is sort of maybe not politically correct these days. Go ahead, Neil. Sorry.
You Protestants took the book of Sirach out of the Bible. That was the mistake. Go ahead.
It wasn't my
I still
fault.
got I still got Ephesians 6:1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's the first promise. It's the first commandment with a promise that you'll live long in the land. That was the memory verse my parents shoved down.
That's a sword drill right there. Is that what they were called? Sword drill? Yeah. Yeah. Luke had that memorized too, I bet. Um, um, and so I don't know, like when it comes to discerning the age, maybe it's just because I've thought about it a lot. Like the conclusion I come to is pay attention. Like there are no magical solutions to protecting your to ultimately protecting your kids, um, or perfectly guiding your kids for the particular time that you're in. But what you have control over is paying attention. Um, so that's just like one quick one-off I have for that. Um, that has helped bring me peace as someone who again probably like over expands my radar to pay attention to too many things. I've in the previous 5 years or so just had a sense of relief knowing like, okay, if I just pay attention, that does a lot of work, but all just by itself. So that's one thing. And on the topic of like reflecting on your own past, or your own upbringing and what was important to you, what you felt even looking back now as an adult did the trick. um I don't think this takes it too far afield, but I will just introduce like weirdly enough, like in my family I don't have a lot of uh like the small positive interactions I have with men, and this gets into the initiation thing. um because like boys and girls are different. Like girls have an almost natural initiation period. Like there's a certain thing that happens as you enter adolescence that forces, like nature forces upon you. Like some woman is going to have to teach you how to do stuff, you know. And boys do too, but it's not talk, not talked about as much, I suppose. But now that I think about it, there are fluids involved with boys as well if you're not careful. So anyway, I'm digressing, but my point is like the the examples I have of like positive um, like specific moments in my mind of um, like men fueling my boyhood into masculinity, like are pretty small, which I don't know why, because my parents are still together. Like I've never doubted that they loved me, you know, but there was like this um and so what I'm doing is I'm setting up like almost like a negative view, but it's to point to a positive. And the negative view is like the things that didn't work was the women trying to be the men, like my mom trying to be the dad. Because I grew up going to church with my mom and not my dad, which was a, you know, the devil's in the details there. Um, but I think my mother in her anxiety like tried to like fill the void, and that didn't work at all. And that's one thing I Christian and I touched on that briefly in our talk. But um, like if a mom comes up concerned to the youth pastor, concerned for her little boy, and the dad's not involved, it's like the thing to do is to be like, um, this is on your husband. Like you can be as concerned for your teenage boy as you want to be, but like if that dad doesn't step up and like father that boy, as a youth pastor, you can't come running to me. Like this is ridiculous. Um, so that's one thing that sticks out to me again on the more negative side of like what didn't work. But on the positive end, it's like again, all I can think of is from that feminine perspective. It's like when I had like teachers or women in my life um, who weren't anxious and who were just like, you're gonna be fine. Like I have this, and I have one moment I can point to, and then I'm gonna like let it go. Of I had a best friend who went to a different school once he got to sixth grade, I think, and and my mom always said it bothered me a lot. I have no memory of it, so I don't know if I like blacked it out or if my mom's remembering stuff that wasn't true. But anyway, like 2 years later, after my friend moved away, um, and the my friend's dad was a dad who was like very present and very involved in his kid's life, um, and he coached me for a couple of years too in basketball. Um, and like when I was on his team, I kind of felt free to like make mistakes, you know, like I wasn't like all reserved and cautious. And so I saw him like years later in seventh or eighth grade. And by then I like retreated back into my shell and like was like making no mistakes on the basketball team, but wasn't performing terribly well. Um, and he saw me and just like in a nonchalant way, he was um, like he referenced like some dudes on my team because I sat on the bench for like most of the game, and I think I ran into him and was like, yeah, like I was sick or something like that, which wasn't really true. I just didn't get put in the game. He's like, yeah, you're better than those guys. Um, and so anyway, that sticks out to me. It was like just like having, and again, this is something Peterson points out because I've been going back through Peterson stuff. He was shocked, like he was actually shocked by the amount of dudes who would come up who had never had a single moment of encouragement from an older man. Um, which again, like criticize the guy all you want. Like if you don't understand the moment and like I don't know, this gets into like Fuentes stuff too. Um, like you can keep focusing on the bad stuff all you want. If you don't understand the moment, like you're really missing out. But anyway, I say all that to say it's like there I didn't have a lot of those moments. And so when they happened, when like it was like an older man saying like, he believed in me. It sticks out to me like as if I found gold, as if I stumbled upon a treasure chest. So, um, but again, I don't say that from like I come from like a very um impoverished in on any dimension background. It just sticks out to me as like what made a huge difference of just like someone who knew me, saw me, believed in me, and wasn't anxious about things. And so I I throw all that in just to as someone who's predisposed towards being anxious about things. Like there's something about children seeing in their parents that Philippians 4, like be anxious for nothing. Um, that I think is the thread through all those stories I told. So that is what I leave with the group.
Hmm. Um, that's good, Nick. This is a pretty, I probably shouldn't have cracked this Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Uh, um,
I
if
I
I
thought
kn
I thought
if I had known we're gonna go into our like generational trauma, I probably wouldn't have predisposed myself to be emotional.
I thought it was
Uh,
either craft beer or kombucha, and I wasn't sure which.
yeah, I should have cracked a kombucha. Because that's what people drink when they're getting therapy, right? It's kombucha. That's very, yeah. Um, I, it's funny you say that, Nick. You're going back through Jordan's stuff. I listened to Paul's video from yesterday. I think contrasting and comparing Peterson and Teal, their way of reading the Bible. But like apart from the point of Paul's video, just the clips that he played from the early maps of meaning and beginning of the Genesis series. It's crazy. I have not listened. I mean, I've listened to some of Jordan's more recent stuff, but I haven't gone back to that old stuff in quite a long time. And uh, today in the car, I mean, just like like I felt like I was in 2017, like in a really tumultuous time in my life when I needed like a father's guidance, and my dad was not. It just is not capable. Was not capable. Wasn't even aware of what was going on. And that's when I dove into Peterson, and it was a good feeling today, just being reminded of like um, just how crucial that was for me, and how I just have so much gratitude for that man, and why I have a really hard time with how badly he's treated despite all his many flaws. So, anyways, just to sort of bolster what you were saying, because he had a hugely positive effect on me. And yeah, this is a hard topic for me because I'm the youngest of uh 12 or 13 cousins on my mom's side, and the youngest of whatever 8, 9, or 10, something like that on my dad's side. My mom had kids late. She was a middle child. My dad was the youngest of five, and so I'm the very, very youngest. And in I never met my dad's dad, uh, and I only knew my grandparents as very old on my mom's side. But I remember as a young kid, and especially as I got a little bit older, like having this feeling like I missed something. Like there was something that was there, that was still present, but that even to some degree I had missed just by being the youngest. But then as I increasingly got older, started to realize like that pattern, I think, was greater than just my order in my family, but also was like, um, how would you say it? Like with each passing generation, something that was there felt like it was dissipating. Um, and that's really general. Like I think there's more specific areas you could go into, but um, my my dad's dad, my grandfather, was fought in World War II, was a pilot, and then started a company uh, buying up old munitions factories around the world that had been sprung up to for munitions for World War II, and then were useless afterwards, and turning them into fertilizer plants. And he made something like $150 million in 1960, whatever. So like I mean, basically a billionaire in today's, and then squandered. Well, some of it was bad luck. He pushed too hard. He had factories in Venezuela that were nationalized, and then but just made some huge bets that did not pay off, and squandered almost pretty much all of that money by the time I was born. And so my dad was raised like in just opulence and like the most aristocratic. They had they had 150 acres in Indian Hill outside Cincinnati, which is just like the most. Yeah, he lived that kind of life. My dad was raised in that kind of family, extraordinary aristocratic um, wealth, and my mom, my grandmother, comes from a family that goes back to British aristocracy. There are five governors of South Carolina in her, going back to like one of the first couple governors in her line. And um, I say all this because there were like really deep patterns of like pride in the negative sense, but also in the positive sense of intellectualism, of honor, of um, like knowing your place, knowing how to treat people, just like a lot, like so many of these things, virtue and vice, like all mixed up. And uh, yeah, it comes down to me being the youngest in this generation and feeling like I missed or don't necessarily feel like I have the capacity to sort through or retrieve what was good. But I definitely like the bad is more obvious. Like that that is passed down. My parents got divorced. They both were bitter about squandered money by their parents. They, you know, went from being in a great financial situation to their divorce causing a much more stressed financial situation. Like just like this like felt like downhill of both sides of the family like really hit home with my parents. And then I was 11. My brothers were both old enough. Of course, it affected them, but they were already like late teenagers and ready to move out of the house. And I was like, again, the youngest one, and was just caught in the crosshairs of like all these patterns I'm talking about, like coming to fruition in my parents. Explosive divorce, infidelity, and then my mom, like you, kind of like what you just said, Nick. My mom trying to be mom and dad, and my dad being a little bit involved, but like basically wanting to go into that friend stage when I was 12, which is when you most need a father. And so the positive was there were men um, that did what that guy did for you in that little interaction. Nick, I actually had three different men that were just incredible at different stages, but really throughout that age from like 11 to 20 that were all tennis coaches um, that played the role of father for me um, in that sometimes outside the frame of tennis, but like using tennis as a way to shepherd me and um, largely because I had like a great talent for this sport, but I think also because these men saw that like my mom was doing it alone, partially her own fault, but she was doing it alone. My dad wasn't around, and it was like this kid needs somebody, and I was very fortunate that there were men that were willing to take up that mantle to do what they could, all flawed in their own ways. Um, but ultimately, getting into adulthood and now wanting to raise my kids, like I learned, I'm so grateful for those men, but there's still like it took me until college to realize, and now becoming a father, like to realize, okay, there's still this massive hole from my actual father and like the both the positive and negative patterns of my own family. Because I think about raising my kids and like it's in one sense really easy, especially because I moved across the country. Like it's really easy to actually just say, especially if you're not relying on your parents for something financial or whatever it is, to just say like, my wife and I both became believers. We have a totally different framework and worldview than our parents, and we are just going to do this thing ourselves. And we'll go see my family once, twice a year, whatever. But like, we're our life's going to be totally different and clean break kind of thing. Um, but the more I've thought about it, it's just like, man, I part of that feels like even the pride of my father manifesting in myself. My pride of my father is because I'm just saying like I'm gonna react and I'm gonna cut off from my family even the good, um, and not do the difficult work of retrieving what is possible to retrieve. And my dad's still around, and I feel the ghost of or just the haunting aspect of like there's a conversation or conversations that I need to initiate with my father that I have never initiated because and I know that he won't maybe until his deathbed or ever. Um and that's yeah, I don't currently possess the humility or the courage to do that, but it it feels necessary to be able to retrieve what can be retrieved. And I think increasingly that feels like a duty. So that my kids are not just the product of me trying to create a certain kind of arena according to principles, but are actually like Hamiltons, like are actually not just biologically the fruit of my family, but and me and my wife, but like beyond just the biological layer, beyond what they will just inherit, um, by way of osmosis from the way I act, but like intentionally are part of like who my family has been, because I do think that that's important. So I don't know if that gets us anywhere, but that's kind of what led me to do my pitch, and your Dan's pitch definitely like I think maybe the last thing I would say with reference to the beginning of Dan's pitch was discerning the age. I think um, one of the big realizations I had that made I had a lot of pride in my family and intelligence, money, different things that I felt like made my family full of winners. And then when I became a believer and started to have new eyes to see both my family and the world, I realized that my family largely has been playing games that are the wrong games, and winning often and losing, lots of winning and losing, but um, they were unaware of the real game or real games. And that was a big like no, Noah in the tent, um, kind of moment of like, oh my gosh, like my family has taken themselves so seriously. My parents took themselves so seriously, and actually they were blind in so many ways, and so were their parents, and so were their parents, and um, yeah.
If I can pick up where you left off, Gray. No, that was great. I want to talk about my father's background. I think I can tie this also into playing the right games. Um, I think my father's superpower and something that I was raised with, but he's got it. It's even stronger than I do. Is like not caring what other people think. He just doesn't care at all. And that level of confidence, I think, instilled in me a sense of confidence of being able to pursue the things that I cared about. But the question is, am I caring about the right things? Um, so my father grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan in the 50s. And Grosse Pointe is one of the richest communities in the country. He went to public school. The public school had a Olympic-sized swimming pool. Public school. My father tells a story that he was in chemistry, and a fellow student that he was with like got a. I think he got. I think it was a C. It wasn't even a B. He got a C in chemistry, and as a reward, his father bought him like a new Corvette. And so the reason everybody's rich in Grosse Pointe is that that was where all the executives of General Motors and Ford lived. But my father, his parents owned a flower shop, and at one point they owned two, and they grew up pretty working class. And my father tells this story as like probably the most retold story in my father's family history, where he's 4 years old and he's got an older brother who's 7, and they're at the flower shop. And the flower shop is roughly like 2 miles from their home. And the 7-year-old, my father's older brother, who's now passed, my uncle, good man. They got along really well over the course of their life. But 7 and a 4-year-old, 7-year-old is picking on the 4-year-old, my father, in the flower shop. And my father, in his inner monologue as a 4-year-old, is like, you know what? Fuck this. I know where I live. And he leaves the flower shop as a 4-year-old. Like he's pre-kindergartner. He's walking home like 2 miles, and the police pick him up like a mile and a half into the journey back to his house. As the 4-year-old, they bring him back. But that was my father's mentality. It's like something stupid and unjust, like I'm gonna take action, and that's sort of like, um, yeah, he's the second most stubborn man I know. And Chad's like that too, which is I think why I love Chad so much. Um, but stubborn in on behalf of righteousness, if that makes sense. Um, and surprise, my father was tough but fair. Um, I got yelled at and I got spanked. I think by my mother, maybe by my dad a few times. And um, but he was fair. Like I went to college with a half scholarship because I had high enough SAT scores. But if my GPA dropped below a 3.0, then I lost the scholarship. And at the end of my freshman year, my GPA dropped below 3.0, and my dad's like, "All right, you're living at home." Like that was the deal. Like basically, you can live on campus if because you're basically paying half of it. And then so I lived at home my sophomore year, and I was in a fraternity, so I hung out at the fraternity house all the time. And I came back smelling like cigarette smoke every night, which I'm sure my parents did not like. But I didn't. I wasn't a smoker, but I was around chain smokers. And but I got scholarship back because of those consequences. Like I didn't want to live at home, and yeah, by my junior year, my parents allowed me to live in a fraternity house, and I kept my grades up because that sophomore year, like I actually learned how to isolate myself and study because I experienced the consequences of my actions. And my father was just a very practical and like he is the dad in if you read Sirach, the book of Sirach. I know I said that in jest, but like he is that guy. He's like, be wise, my son, walk on my ways, and you will do just fine. And so I want to go back to man, who was talking about somebody was talking about I think it was Nick. It was trusting God completely versus planning carefully. And I think we're meant to do both. Like we're meant to stand on the shoulders of those that came before us and learn from their mistakes and learn from their wisdom. Um, and at the same time, like we do the best we can based on wisdom, but we still trust in God completely. And so like the wisdom can never supersede like us knowing like the this followed the science of parenting, that can never supersede the personalist knowing of God, you know. Um,
There's a there's a proverb that says a man makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps. And that's
oh yeah.
anyway, that's the way to live right there.
That's the proverb that got me to marry my wife.
That's the proverb that got me to go to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry.
I want to hear from Risto though.
Well, along with that proverb, I guess the question is who do we want authoring our kids' stories? Um,
Mm,
at the beginning, I had a lot of good plans for how I was going to parent years ago. And I look back on those, and some of those plans really weren't great plans, and other ones probably were good plans that weren't followed through, and maybe a few of them were followed through. Um, so I'm probably not as terrible as a parent as I think in some ways, and maybe worse in other ways. We'll see. Time will tell. Um, it's definitely one of the heaviest things that I've ever done. These these kids pop out, you fall in love with them. It's a like a it's not like romantic love. It just automatically happens. And to have like the people you care about most, and then if you're not ever not there for them or you hurt them, that's about as heavy as it gets. And I can relate to what Nick said with like struggling with like anxiety. And I think you see this with a lot of men, and I've definitely embodied this a lot, but where your choices are, like you deal with the stuff or you kind of shut it out and run away. Whether that's with a distraction with like work or a hobby or whatever. I've been like super distracted or just like wallowing in whatever those failures were. Those tend to be like kind of the two rather than actually dealing with it. There's a kind of a father, you can see a picture of a father figure in one of my favorite movies, Stray Dog by Akira Kurosawa, where there's this young detective and he loses his gun, and this is in Japanese society. And so that's like a like dishonorable thing. Like he's ready to quit, but his boss won't let him quit. And then he just kind of wallows in like how terrible of a situation it is, and these crimes start happening. And he's worried that it was from his gun. But there's this older detective who comes alongside him and like kind of gets him to chillax a little bit and focus on actually doing the things. So I think it hits me so strong because I can either ignore or run away from things or just like catastrophize on the failure instead of like doing it relaxing. Like the older detective is always super relaxed and laughing and chill, but trying to get the younger guy to focus on doing the things. Um, but they don't know how it'll turn out. The story unfolds as it will, and bad stuff does happen from the result of what the guy did, um, that he was careless. So that's definitely gonna happen in my life. I hope things are better for you guys, but like ultimately, it's like who do I want writing the story for my kids or me? Um, I think that's the question. And I've done a shitty enough job writing that I think I need to participate and do my part, but I think I got to give up the authorship. And I don't want my kids to turn out like Jordan Peterson's.
Ooh, one of the things in this conversation about, I mean, handoff, arena, um, sins of the father, sins of ourselves. I don't know, a few months ago, I just was kind of overwhelmed. Well, here's what happened. A little more like granular, personal. I've shared this other places, but like, uh, kind of like, Gray. My grandfather, uh, after the war, he ended up owning in some mines that were mining manganese iron ore that were making tanks. And he sold a bunch of them and bought 1,000 acres around where we live. And my dad, after my grandmother died, there was 400 acres and it got divided up, and he ends up with about 125 of it. And my aunt and uncle, they go off and live in retirement communities, and and my dad holds on to this land, and it's just like this burden. Um, but he loves it. And it's so strange because he was adopted. Um, and his his brother, who was like 16 years older, didn't, he was like, I'm out. And he lives in the house that my grandfather and great grandfather built. And so I went over there the other day, and this guy who actually is technically my cousin is paving a new road, and the land's like all right across the street from my parents' house. And he's paving this road and putting a fence and a gate. I was like, what the hell is this guy doing to my land? I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I was like, because I hated working that. I hated working like Luke was talking about. And it ends up, I mean, that was kind of a harsh reaction, but it got me really thinking about like some of the things like my parents, I know a lot about my mom's genealogy. My dad's local, knows a lot about the history of this place we live. Uh, my parents were pretty spontaneous. They were the youngest, large families. They were, the least parented and the most trouble. Like and then so they know how to like live it up. But one thing to your point, Gray, and to these questions about how to frame the arena of and Risto, what you were kind of saying about how do we step back and observe or these sort of things was two things. One being that like we've already had two moments on this Peterson thing. So I'll throw in Carl Jung said something along the lines of like you're uh, something to the effect of like what do your kids need from you? And one of his conclusions was to see that you're living like a life that you I don't know love or something. I don't know. And I think that can go way too far into neglect and like, oh, well, I'm living my best life, or whatever. But that your kids see you uh, that you care about something.
Enthusiasm.
It, yeah, that's a good yeah, and then also so like you're going after something and that so part of parenting isn't even conscious. It's what your kids are watching you pursue with your life and where you put your attention. And is that meaningful? Is it to your phone, my phone? Is it to these things? Is it to church? Is it to Christ? Is it to football? That was, oh no. And then, but then this question kind of with all this kind of rose up within me about like, what we don't use mythic language for our lives. It was actually this idea with, at least for the middle class of America, was completely destructed. The idea that you have like a legacy, like that's like such a big word to to think in terms that you like there's this evangelical version of that that's like, you're living a legacy of faith and you want to see that your kids follow in these footsteps, but like your career, finances, these pictures, it's just that's all abstract or whatever, but there's something to uh really believing eh, that you have a legacy to either reignite or rebuild or start or to like I sit here and think about that land and I think that was part of what woke up in me was because it's like even thinking like we use this word like your inheritance, it's an abstract thing that goes into place in a person's will or trust when things but like we don't think of ourselves as heirs. We don't think of ourselves that way. That's like a medieval concept. We don't think of ourselves as, but yet these things, these patterns like play out. Like, so I'm talking to our parents about, they put a trust in place because they were going to go on a trip to Europe and they're like, if we both die, something needs to, it was kind of this, again, it was like reacting to this like spontaneous thing. It wasn't really like this forethought in a lot of ways. But even in the trust, the oldest son has this certain place, and then there's this like these patterns kind of play out. Yet we kind of just pretend they don't exist a lot of the time. And so there's a certain seriousness uh, about our family and like I have a uncle who's got Alzheimer's and he's got two daughters and a son, and his son's the youngest. But he has this thing inside of him that wants his son to come home, and he wants to talk to his son about the end. He wants to talk to him about the family stuff. And you know, I just these ideas of legacy, these ideas of being an heir to something, if you're an heir to anything, and if you weren't, considering that your kids will be, and that may not be of land but like we just don't have that conversation, and it was kind of like they don't want the middle class to have that conversation. They want the middle class to just go out and industrialize and work. So, if you stay and try to make something for your own, it doesn't go elsewhere. And
I do.
I
Yeah, no, you can finish your thought, Christian.
I was just gonna say, and the
Yeah.
last thought was like, even our names, like, um, so I got my brothers and sisters together, and I was like, we give so much of our whatever gifts we've cultivated in life to other people's names, but do we care about even giving it to our like what would it look like if we learned how to trust each other as adults? And that trust isn't an abstract document that goes into place when somebody dies, but it's actually something that's cultivated in real people and those in familial relationships. Um, and those are just old ideas that I think that come into play with this whole conversation of parenting and legacy. It reframes like how you view your kids and how you view the future.
Yeah, what I heard from Gray, I don't know if Gray's still listening, but at the moment, but what I heard from him is a family that cared deeply about legacy, multi-generational legacy, being like pillars of the community. But it's always like pillars of a community to what end, or pillars of what community, and how are you being a pillar? And there is, I think there is such a thing as I'm not an anarchist in that I think there is such a thing as a way to be a pillar in a way that's edifying and can build up and can it is possible to be a servant leader. That is possible without I think we have this image in my head, and I think I even partially believe it, that in the United States, servant leadership doesn't work because in the United States, you have to compete to get ahead, whether it's a mega church, whether it's whether it's an election, whether it's a any organization that you're competing. So, and this I think ties back to being role models, and so what does it mean to lead in service? What does it mean to voluntarily lay down your life for others in a competitive arena where you only get ahead by competing? What does it mean to be a Christian man? I'm basically broadening this conversation quite a lot because I do feel that tension because like what and that's playing the right game, going back to what Gray is talking about, because I think the conventional Christian approach is like, yes, we are a good Christian family. We help the poor, we help the community, but our family and our preservation and our legacy come first. And actually, that's not Christian in my book, which is the damning thing. Um,
Well,
I'm maybe
let me
being
answer
very
that.
yeah. Go ahead.
My grandfather, who had the 1,000 acres, kept miners on a payroll after the mine shut down until they died.
Yeah, so that is Christian leadership, like straight up.
And he was a Methodist, and he led the songs at church, and he had wealth, and it cost him.
Yeah. I mean, it's examples like that why I'm not an anarchist at all. And
And I didn't know that till last year.
yeah, and the fact that he didn't even talk about it or broadcast it.
He died when I was 4, so I don't.
Okay, okay.
Well, my grandfather, not a perfect guy, but he was born in Ravensden Spring, Arkansas. No running water, His joke was always they had to run to get the water. He moved to California when he was young, and he never looked back. I don't think he ever visited Arkansas again. I don't know what what about his growing up he didn't like, but he came from nothing.
It was the
It,
cotton fields, man.
it was so poor. They were so poor. His dad would cut down trees for telephone poles or something. I don't know, but they had, I think they literally lived in a barn. But and then he kind of died with nothing. He didn't leave us any money. Um, and he even lost his memory at the end. But the legacy he left was his favorite hymn was trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And he was just a simple guy. He would have no interest in the corner or thinking, like any like analyzing life. I would tell him about stuff I'm struggling with, and he would look at me like he just could not connect with whatever I was going through. But his advice to me was just to serve your family. And I saw him do that as a carpenter. I saw him do that when his doctor said his cholesterol was too high and he started getting egg whites in a box or some weird like 80s stuff, whatever his doctor recommended. Like he did the stuff to be there for us when he was later in life. And then like who he was, even as he lost his memory and didn't recognize me anymore as his family. He still laughed. He was still relaxed. He was still chill. He was still trusting. That trust had like become part of his DNA. Um, and so leaving that kind of a legacy, that was good. Not a perfect legacy. There were still things I would, want to do different, but definitely one to aspire to in a lot of ways.
Yeah, man, I think we all leave a legacy of some sort, you know. My dad, speaking to the trust that you were talking about, Nick, my dad and my mom, they were Catholic, and they trusted that if the Lord was going to give them kids, he would give them the money to pay for them. And so they were hoping to be done with six. They ended up with eight. I always say it took them 8 tries to make it right because I'm the eighth. But like that's the way they lived their life. They trusted God, and my dad would tell stories of, I mean, he grew up in the 50s, actually the 40s, late 40s. His friends he'd be in the car with his friends and they'd go to a whorehouse and he would sit in the car. All of his friends would go in. He would sit in the car. He was waiting until he's married. You know,
I think that's
that's just,
also the right choice because whorehouses are gross.
I would imagine.
From experience, Luke.
Just saying, I don't know, but
Yeah. Your
I
dad
assume.
your dad read all of Proverbs.
yeah, I mean that's the way he lived his life like that. He was real down to earth. Uh, I mean, he gave us so much structure as a family, which, for gosh sakes, if you have 8 kids, you better. It could have been chaos. But I can tell you, I, you know, he had 2 girls and then he had 4 boys, and nobody ever fought in our house. Not ever. There was never a fight. And not because he ruled with an iron fist. It was just like, that's not what you do. We're a family. We take care of each other. We had to. And so we did. And by a lot of my friends' standards, we probably went without, but I didn't think so. We had what we needed. And so that's just the legacy my dad leaves, is trust. And I was just at their house before we started, and I look over, my parents are 92 and 94. And I look over and my mom's talking to my dad and she just kind of said something to him they both thought was funny and just kind of like leaned her head over on his chest, and I was just like, man, goals. I want
Yeah.
that.
Well, what do you mean by that? Like when you say the legacy your dad left is trust.
Well, trust in the Lord. He trusted in the Lord.
Mm.
And then he trusted the Lord's structure, that he felt like that was what he did. And they had a really traditional relationship as far as my dad was disciplinarian. He was he made the structure in the home.
Mm.
He said he set the rules. The rules would be obeyed. mom was more of the, love and nurture. She was so good that way. I mean, I remember times I got bullied when I was a kid because I was little, and she would just always just say the right thing, you know. And of course, as a kid, I'm like, oh, you have to say that. You're my mom. But it was the thing I needed to hear,
Hmm.
and it kept me going, you know. And then, uh, my dad, he just, he believed in that structure and that I was part of that structure. You can do stuff. And so he would just give me responsibility and then I would do it. And over time, that's how you learn you can do things. And then so I could participate in that structure that he framed as a man, you know, and that kind of gave me, when I think back on it, I'm raising my own kids, I don't think made as much structure for my kids as he did for me. That was my choice. But I can see how my kids would have benefited had I leaned more into that, I think. But I think that's the legacy he passed to me. What legacy will I pass to my kids, And I really don't know. I know when my kids got to their teenage years and they went around with their friends, they would always say, our house is different, Dad. And that's what I wanted to hear. You guys don't argue like their parents. My son's girlfriend right now. Yeah, she says they have a lot of arguments at their house, but we talk. And she likes that better.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, you hope, but I can see now that I've gotten older the value in the structure that my dad created. It took me a long time to recognize that. Um,
Hmm.
I I lost the thread a little bit because I was my daughter woke up. Um, so and my wife is watching the Dancing with the Stars finale with neighbor. So
Mine too.
You didn't tell her
that's
you're with the real stars.
yeah. I'm like, honey, don't you
That's right.
know that the TLC is way more important than that? Actually, it's with a neighbor, so she's really doing communal life. So I should, yeah. But I that actually kind of made me forget what I was gonna say. Oh no, I remember. Um, I This sort of ties into Luke's pitch a little bit, with the technology piece. I So one of the things talking to Jordan and Annie a lot these past couple months that frankly, I'm not 100% sure, even after talking to them for 6 hours, that we ever actually got this. One of the things I kind of hoped we would dig into, but just it never really got there was it, there are things. So we've been talking a little bit about the legacy and the values we've inherited, and you could say the virtues we've inherited as well as vices and things from our fathers. But like Neil, part of your framing for this was in 2025, and moving forward. Like so for me, just getting started, it's like from 2025 to 2045 or whatever. Um, which it's hard to imagine a 20-year period being more tumultuous in terms of change than my 0 to 20 from 1996 to 2006 to 2016. Um, with the amount of change, but I think a lot of us think, and a lot of folks would say that the next 20 years could easily be even more than what we've experienced over the last 25 or 30. Um, and, part of what makes this whole thing so difficult is like let's take it as a given that we've done the difficult work and have been remotely successful in um, like sort of carrying on the positive legacy of like our fathers, and maybe the answer here is just what you guys have been saying about trusting God in the daily. I mean, ultimately that is the answer, right? But um, in terms of like intentionality, what does it look like to navigate the things that are genuinely novel? Um, and technology, obviously, the reason I point back to Luke is because that's a huge one that I think my parents, um, I guess I'm the youngest one here, but Nick, you're not that much older than me. But I I don't blame my parents at all for the fact that I watched porn for the first time when I was 11 or whatever it was. I mean,
Hmm.
a little bit like they should have. It's easy to look back and say they should have been more aware. But like, I just don't think they. My dad was even pretty tech forward, but like, I just don't think it would have taken, I think, a high level of intentionality, a Christian formation that my parents didn't have to maybe be able to put the brakes on something like giving me an iPod Touch or, you know, somewhat unrestricted computer access, things like that, that just, I don't blame them because I don't think they had seen the ways that could go catastrophically wrong. Um, and I think it's easy to say now, oh, well, I won't make that. That's an easy mistake not to make. But what is that for my generation? You know what I mean? Maybe it's AI. Maybe I don't know exactly. But um, I'm wrestling with that because I have friends. We're with our life group at church who are very close friends here that we try to live as intimately with as we currently know how to and are willing to. Um, and that they're willing to. And we all have, I think in our group we have like 6 kids under 4. Um, and last weekend we all spent the weekend together, and just throughout, like I just noticed that all of the other couples, like their kids, um, at different times held their phones or were very quick to go grab them, and they were kind of okay. Just there was like a pretty looseness with the kids kind of messing with the phones. Um, and I sound like such a luddite, but my wife and I afterwards both, I just said, hey, like I'm like really, I feel really guilty when my daughter Juliet even sees us like putting our attention on the phone instead, the little box instead of on her, or on something more worthy of my attention. And I'm really not comfortable with her holding my iPhone. Like I don't like, I really, it makes me uncomfortable. But our close friends seem to be very cavalier about that, even while they would say that they're aware of like, oh, they shouldn't have small screens and things like that. And so, um, I don't know if this moves us forward in a different direction and you guys want to take it back somewhere else, but I just, the tech is maybe just one example because I think there's other ways in which the world is really rapidly changing and has changed since our parents were parenting us, even me being the youngest one here. But aside from like obviously saying, hey, like trust in God, of course that's the answer. But it's like that arena agent kind of thing in a world that's rapidly changing, that feels very intimidating to me because I know how much I retain the scars of things like unrestricted internet access and just pop culture and all these things, from my upbringing. And even as a Christian now, it affects like yeah, there's things I can't even like share that just internal. Like my own sin is like, it's brutal. It's brutal. Um, and I just, gosh, like how do we walk that line, you know?
All that stuff is so tough. I mean, I really feel like the last year and a half, 2 years of our life have been the thorough technology thing. And um, man, I have so many thoughts about it because I mean, part of me wants to go the education route of properly educating your children, and then how to do that is hard because I love like Simone Biles education is basically teaching people how to pay attention. And the way I really have thought about that recently is it's just it's being present in the moment to pay attention to what you should be paying attention to. And there's no there's no way to prescribe that because it's and this is stuff we talk about on the TLC all the time because it's so contextual. Like I have these conversations about my kids privately a lot of times because I just don't want to talk about this stuff publicly. But like our kids, I feel like we had the technology thing nailed until adolescence, until they got cell phones. Like it was a fucking cakewalk. It was easy. They didn't have cell phones. They only watched screen. My wife re-engineered this thing. So we were living at a time where there was a huge Hispanic population, and she realized, and she just kind of, my wife is constantly thoughtful about things like this. Like she's like a ninja of practicality. And so she's always thinking about how to like life max kids. And she was just like, all these people learn English through watching TV, so we'll just reverse engineer that. So we only ever let our kids watch TV in Spanish. We're like, if you're watching screens, they're in Spanish, period. Or you don't watch screens. So like all of our kids are basically at least listening and some speaking. Speaking's kind of a different thing, but they all are basically fluent in Spanish because we only let them watch TV that way. And then they hit
Luke,
adolescence.
that's like cultural eugenics.
Thank you. Um, and then they hit that age of have middle school, high school of having more autonomy. And even like eating. We were that way with eating. Like we were like, this is the meal I prepared. I'm a very like scratch, whole foods cooker, grass-fed beef, organic, vegetables from my garden. Like that's it. Real food, no processed shit all the time. Like we joke, my youngest, like I used to make her like liver pate when she was a baby and fed it to her. And people are just like, that's like child abuse. I'm like, no, what you're doing to your children is child abuse. And so like, but now I feel like they reverted. Like my children now, they just like eat at the gas station. Like they don't eat my food and they just eat at the gas station. And and the cell phone thing is so much harder. Like that's their big gripe to us is like very much like you were saying, Zep, that your house is different, but like in a complaining way. Like all their friends have unrestricted access to phones, and we've regulated that a lot. It's been a struggle with our oldest. Um, we've gone back and forth. I mean, it's just like I could talk about it endlessly, and so it's a difficult thing. And so many things are temperament too, because we have a friend family in town that has kids almost the exact same age, and maybe this is more like Zepp's family, but some kids are just very like aren't neurotic. They're very agreeable, and so like they just have the little like angel children that just do what their parents say all the time. And I'm like, that's not my family. And I was telling my wife last night, I'm like, you married into a family of just total crazy people. And I just like walked her through like everyone in my family. And I'm like, we're all nuts. Like I'm the most like mentally sane in my family, if that's telling you anything. Um, and anyhow, so like there's just there is no prescription about it. And then you try to teach your kids how to be attentive, but then an aspect of that that's really difficult is the collapse of community, right? Because I think that's one of the huge benefits I was hearing about having such a big family. One of the huge benefits of having a big family is you can't like it's almost the same benefit of growing up poor is like you don't have the time and energy and resources of affluence or time or boredom to get caught up in a bunch of crap. Like even I've thought that like some of my like if we had a bunch more kids, I think a lot of the problems that we'd have in our family or they would just change, they'd evolve, they'd be different because they would be preoccupied. Like both my daughters love little kids and they're like asking to have little siblings all the time, and then they would be self-regulating and teaching themselves benefits and doing that. And so like but we're all trying to do it. Grim was talking about this the other day of even making the nuclear family the primary thing, which was kind of a mind control thing. And then with technology and cars and jobs, it's very Wendell Berry stuff. We all move all around the country and extended families collapse, churches collapse. And so we're all just trying to like game this our own through technology and books and psychology and life maxing, self-help books and reading parenting books. And it's like it's almost like but like we've lost the cultural bodies to that just like used to carry all the weight. Like our parents and grandparents just did it unconsciously because they had the cultural body to do it in,
Bingo. Yeah.
And
Oh,
so it's yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'm like a lot of y'all know my story and like made very poor decisions in my life. Somehow like stumbled into this situation. I mean, and I'll credit Jordan Peterson for his help. I just, and the thing like we're talking about, this like we're here. Like how did like eh, come on, right now. So, uh, very poor, selfish, foolish decisions in my life. And so the cultural breakdown, like this question of limit, but there's also this question of pattern and this question of story. I can't, who was saying, I want what stories are we, was that you, Risto? What stories are we going to give our kids? Or was it Zep? I can't, or Dan. No, it was Dan? Someone else. I don't remember. Uh, like I remember the day that I got a Spotify account for I guess maybe she's 14 or 15. And she'd been on this kind of lockdown phone. Like, there's all like the homeschool phones that everyone gets, these different brands. Like, is this company called Pinwheel, give us some money for this show. But, and she loved it. And she went to this class in sixth grade that talked about all the dangers of online stuff, like at our public school. And she's like, Mom, Dad, thanks for all y'all do, just keeping everything kind of, firstborn kid. Like, and she gets to like eighth grade. She's like, "Can I get a cooler phone? Can I get an iPhone?" So like, okay, um, like Spotify, no really other apps. Some of your other church and homeschool friends have Marco Polo, and if you know what that is, that carried over from her other. It's kind of like I mean it's millennial boomer Snapchat. It's just very basic. Anyways, and I remember giving her this Spotify, and the day I did, I said, I just want you to know, like, this is kind of a big deal. Like, I'm giving you every song in the world right now. I'm giving you every song in the world. Like, obviously, that's not. And I was just like, I had a CD case, and it was like all Christian music, and it was limited, and and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And I told her that I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I'm giving you and there's also Spotify has got they've got like reels now and stuff, kind of type things. They've got podcasting on there. It's like so that was and there's been we've had other issues on the phone stuff. She's been grounded once before. It's like yeah, and we're probably are naive, or we're probably lazy, or we're probably all these things, and it's like my kid will never eat chicken nuggets. Luke probably was like successful at that, but the rest of humanity was not that neurotic. But like my kid will never look
They
on
eat at
screens.
gas stations. It's a thing.
And so, they come by it honestly, but it's like uh so there's that point of like I don't know. And with the future with technology. And what's interesting is my daughter who's in junior high, my other daughter, like she's had kind of the brick dumb phone, just like she can message us a little bit, like one or two of her friends, and it's like Wi-Fi, and she doesn't hardly ever use it. And she's at situations, and she's in a little popular crew, and she's not begging us. And I've noticed this, like talking about like paying attention. I'm like, why is she not begging us for this? And I don't know what it is. And for one, the Arkansas state put in legislation this year that banned the use of phones from bell to bell. Like
So did
it's a
Texas.
law.
So did Texas.
So so it's a law now. So there's also like there's not this social pressure in a lot of ways for her to be seen with or without in the school time, and that'll change as she gets older. Um, so that's kind of been there, but with the oldest one, it was like recognizing. And so where we put limits in our life, like this was the thing about patterns, um, somehow in spite of like foolishness, like end up being a part of a church where both sets of grandparents are there. And uh and my kids like which grandparents are we going to lunch with after church? And like with my cultural or liturgies, um patterning liturgies, like not getting everything right, not being like the most learn every scripture, but like, holy times of the year, Advent, Lent, like doing things as a family in that pattern, church's pattern. Hey, on Sundays, let's not listen. Let's actually, I can make my kids listen to worship, like pop worship music on Sundays. Like if they're getting ready, my girls are fixing their hair. I'm like, no Taylor Swift today. But it's not like no Taylor Swift ever. And that's one of the weird things about looking out on the cultural landscape. How many things held our culture together in the 90s for many of us millennials? Like she's like one of the few holding our culture together. And I know that sounds crazy, but like on a very massive level, on a pop culture level, she's one of the few things we all took for granted watching ER or Seinfeld or uh, certain like everyone's paying attention to these sports because there's only like no there aren't these micro communities and stuff like there are very few things that are holding. I'm not saying she's holding our culture together like in a certain way, but like she's something that if you have teenage girls and live through this and millennial moms, like it's a big deal. And and so it's like I'm not going to deprive my kids of a certain amount of cultural engagement, like even though it's not like I don't know. That's where I've come to on some of that. It's these stories because it's a story. Like we watch the Super Bowl. My daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, has never watched the Super Bowl, but because Travis Kelce and we're doing it as family and we're dressing up and being silly and having a Super Bowl party as a family because of Taylor Swift. Like I don't, um, and so engaging like where are the cutoffs and stuff. I'm convinced the last piece of this is like what stories do I give my kids? Like I believe in the Bible stories and trying to give them like, some kind of entertainment hygiene. Like if I'm gonna sit down and watch a 2-hour movie with my kids, we're gonna watch Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Harry Potter. And it's like the best I feel like I can do in the like screen in the age of the screen domination. Even for myself, it's not like making my kids read that much. It's like, but I could still maybe offer them some good stories that are within our culture, our modern cultural narratives that talk about courage and friendship and these deeper ontological realities. And so that's yeah
Yeah. Oh,
stuff.
I yeah, Christian, I don't even know what the word is. Yes to what you're saying. Like I think the difficulty I've felt recently as I've thought a lot about what I want to do with my kids is it's really, really difficult because I my my family, we're like huge movie people, like huge. Like we have a canon of movies, but really it's basically like there's an unspoken thing called taste. So you better not quote a movie that's a shitty movie. But also if you're gonna occasionally you should quote a shitty movie in a sarcastic way and show that you know it's shitty, but you know how to. It's like my wife was absolutely baffled by this like the first 5 times she spent time with my family because she's like you people communicate like for 30 minutes and it's just been in like Doc Holliday quotes and Saturday Night Live references from like Chris Farley like what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
um
Cultural liturgies.
yes, but
Yeah.
now I have this lens for viewing these things where I'm like okay, by the time I was like 5 or 6 I had watched the movie Airplane, which I don't know if you guys have seen Airplane, but I mean, Airplane is one of the funniest movies ever. But I had watched that movie by like age 6, and so like I saw a bare naked lady by the time I was 6, probably, just in that one scene or whatever. Um, and I'm like, no, I don't want that for my kids, of course. But I also know that my sense of humor was formed like by my family, by these movies, like, a movie like Tombstone, also a super intense movie. There's a lot in there you probably don't want your kids watching, but like I don't want my kid reaching age 18 and not having witnessed like Doc Holliday's, just Val Kilmer's acting in that movie. And so it's really difficult because I'm like, there's the good and the bad are so mixed up. And um, I mean, movies is just one example, but it's the same for kind of everything, for music, for all these things. Like, um, and it's hard to parse, and it's something like trying to find a way of enough exposure that there's some inoculation to like the shock factor or the wow factor, because I knew kids that were really, that were really, really sheltered, and then got to college, and you know like I started drinking at 14, so by the time I got to college I was a seasoned, you know so not good, terrible actually, but I did not get arrested in college. Like I wasn't, I was away from my parents for the first time, and they didn't need to worry that I was gonna like, you know kill myself drinking or whatever. But I knew multiple kids who, for the first time being away from their parents, they hospitalized themselves, they whatever it was, because they just didn't know how to handle it. There was no inoculation that had happened in a more controlled environment, and so that's something I wrestle with a lot, because I was not raised a Christian at all. So I was pretty much free reign. I was the youngest, and I was exposed to way too much, way too early. There are the negative sides, but there were definitely, I will like stand by the fact that there were positive aspects of that. Uh, and it's really hard to draw a line and understand how to walk that in any way that's not just like willy nilly, like with intentionality. So I really don't know how to do it. But I know that I actually have a genuine gratitude that doesn't feel like sinful for like the initiation I got into like some of the best of like pop culture and different things like that, again, don't fit really neatly into a Christian framework in a lot of ways.
Well, and isn't it the question is like be how do I what do I want to be successful in? What's the aim? What's the goal? Like, do I want the kid who's the prodigal son at the end, or the older son who stayed home, who's classically educated and protected and righteous and
Such a
um
great, I love that you said classically educated. Just
well,
what a
I taught
statement.
at a classical school for a few years, and I didn't want my kids turning out that way.
Yeah.
But
What if what if you
but
Do
stayed
you
home
want your
and you're the
kids?
prodigal?
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Well, but and I in many ways I've done worse than all those kids that sent their kids to that good classical school as a parent. So I don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
I'm in the pig pen eating the crap when I shouldn't be. Um, but I do that is my concern of like what are we aiming for? Like we could sculpt all the media stuff. I could have my kids just watch all the good movies and be classically educated and learn how to think critically and just get down that road to the end. But where's the heart of the whole thing? Um, I was stung by a stingray in the ocean a few years back, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, maybe around then. And I thought I was gonna die. I didn't know what happened, but I felt like pain and poison going up my leg, and I'm like, this is it. And I had two thoughts. I was like, well, before I die, there's some areas of my life that are not right, and I wish they were right, and they were being aligned with God in a way that I felt like it should be, and then being physically healthy, which is something in my family that generationally hasn't been great. And I still haven't done great in those areas, but it's interesting that that's what focused as I'm like, okay, this is the end right here. Um, and so I had those ideas. Maybe those aren't even God's ideas for me. Who knows? He writes the story, not me. But I think,
Are,
the question is, how does he want to write that story? Is classical education the number one in his book? Is like, what are the things that are the things that he wants to focus on?
so I want to tout my wife's horn for a moment. I want to
Take it easy.
our daughter not at probably she was probably doing this by 8. Um, she is fully she's rousing herself, meaning she gets herself out of bed for school. It's not something that's a fight. She dresses herself. She picks out her because it's Catholic school uniform, so that helps. But she has dress down days where she doesn't have to, where she can choose. But so she gets her clothes. She brushes her own teeth. Like, um, my wife still, if she doesn't get school lunch, my wife still, preps the lunch. But that's basically the extent of, the work that she has to do at age. And that's all my wife, honestly. Like, because I remember when I was middle school, high school, I wouldn't want to get out of bed. My wife would like serve me, or my wife, my mom would serve, would serve me food like a full
That's called
breakfast.
a Freudian slip there, boys.
Yeah, I'm a Jungian though, so we're good. Yeah. And yeah, no, I was a spoiled rotten only child for 10 years, man. Like I was and I would say the habits, building in the habits are the frame. Like that's the frame. Like you might my daughter more than anything else right now, she wants to watch, I mean, probably not more than anything else, but she really wants to watch the movie Titanic. She's too young. Like my wife and I have had that conversation. It's like maybe 12. But she is watching the Harry Potters. But my wife and our daughter are listening to the Harry Potter books first in the car, and she's only allowed to watch a movie after they actually listen to the audiobook. And so they just got to spoilers, everyone. Snape kills Dumbledore. My daughter really hates Snape right now. Really hates, you know. Did I spoil it for you, Nick? Yeah, but she really hates Snape right now. But it's like you do want to expose when they're ready for the darkness, like whatever that darkness is. And but on the other hand, and I've actually complimented my daughter on this. I've said like I'm really proud of you for doing this, and I've given her credit, which is like sometimes my wife's aunt and her mother will watch a scary movie. They'll watch something that's like PG-13 or rated R when we're over their house, and my daughter will, be scared of the explosions or the screaming or whatever it is, and or there's blood or like a gun or something, and she'll remove herself from the room. She'll just, take herself out of the equation. And I give my daughter a lot of credit that, I said you're handling that perfectly, and yeah, so that like the maximal responsibility at the youngest age, but not beyond what they're ready. Like I'm a real fan of incrementalism. I don't know if it's gonna work, but like the incremental maximal responsibility. But they have to demonstrate that they are, what's the word, adhering to that level of responsibility. So,
It's funny because we're listening to Harry Potter on the way to school with my son right now, but he he there's a whole academic story behind it. But the thing, like, there's just these different kind of approaches, different things. There you go, Silmarillion. But it's like he hadn't been interested in stories and all this stuff, and reading starting to click for him this year. And so I started playing it as a way to kind of encourage this imaginative side of him. And so I'm playing it, and then we go up in his room, and he's like, "Dad, let's watch a movie," or "I want to watch a movie." And I'm like, "Okay." And I'm looking through our movies, and oh, and then I was like, "Oh, let's watch Jurassic Park," because he likes Jurassic Park stuff. And he goes, "Oh, what about Harry Potter?" And he got embarrassed because he gets embarrassed real easy. But it was because we just started listening to it, but it's something stuck into his imagination, and so then he just binged all of them. So We didn't incrementalize, but he doesn't understand some of it, like the steak. He doesn't because it was so much. He just was, and so it's like now he has this imaginary framework that helps him superimpose that back onto the book. And I felt like he needed that, but I think that different in situations, like your kid, and like things that they need related to that speed or whatever, and how they're going on. But it's just funny that both our kids are listening to Harry Potter and on the way to school right now. I think that's cool.
And and Christian, that's the least you can do after you ruin that dinner with your son.
That's for damn sure.
Well, and Neil, like, I think we think about those things as parents, like those very specific things. But I'm most encouraged for your kid that I see a love of Jesus in you and that secret mirth, you know, that, number one thing that I was worried about as I'm about to die in the ocean, like that I see that in you. Like, you're going to make some mistakes, you're going to do some good stuff along the way, but that, like, would give me most hope for your offspring.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there's a lot of stuff like Zap and Dan, you got to jump in here, but we're pretty liberal when it comes to all that stuff. Like even my kids, I almost feel like part of it's a temperament. Like we almost they don't like how much we monitor screens, but part of that is um, we're like you can do almost anything else because we're really on the John Haidt tip of this. We're just like most parents overprotect in the physical world and underprotect in the digital world, and we're like the opposite. So we're just like, and that's still very difficult because all their other kids do it, and they like can't even socialize without Snapchat or whatever. But like my son, he goes out. He does like urban exploring all the time. Like he's been up on like abandoned public school buildings, like the famous grain belt sign in Minneapolis. He like climbs to the top of it, takes pictures and stuff. Like I'm just like I couldn't care less. Go out. I'm like go do stuff. Get off your phone. Go impregnate a teenage girl. I don't care. Like do anything except like be on your
Go
time.
go run through those Somalian ghettos, Find out what's out there, brother.
That's what I do, Nick.
Mogadishu.
I do that, Nick, for real.
Listen, t clean up your own town, all right? Clean up your own room. Also, I like Somalis, okay? I like them. I'm not
Hey
Same,
man,
same here, Luke.
ethnocentric.
if you're autistic, you got some money coming in, that's for sure.
Jeez. This is keep that shit over on Federaci, okay?
No, I'll let me rein it in for a second here. I thought this was going to be my last word, but but it's not going to be. What I was going to say is like you have all these ideas, of what you want to do as a parent. But I think back to now that I'm a parent, like I'm about to have freaking three, which is crazy, because I still feel like I'm like a 21-year-old aimless dude, um, you know, um, wishing I could refrain from using one of my hands past, 10 p.m. uh, with a glowing screen of a Proverbs not 31 woman luring me in with her digital silk sheets. But anyway, here I am, like 34, with like almost three kids. And I think of like what Peterson says when he's like, and again, I go back to Peterson because this really is the spirit of it. It will always, for me, be the spirit of the internet space that I occupy. And so when you would talk about like, and you got to understand, this is in the context of him talking to like Richard Dawkins bros. It's like, oh yeah, like you want to dismiss prayer, that's fine. But like, what do you call it when you sit on the edge of your bed and the first thing like you think to yourself, what's the thing I need to be doing that I'm not doing? Um, like what do you call that? And like now that I almost have three children, it's like that's still prescient, It's like that's probably the best thing I can do for my children is whenever I sit on the edge of my bed and like what's the thing that comes to mind. It's like, I can focus on like what school to go to or what town to move to or what discipline to implement or what liturgy to do like at the end of the night. It's like that's all good stuff. I don't deny that at all. Like that's all like really good stuff. But as a father, probably the best thing I can do is implement that thing that comes to my mind that I'm not taking care of, that I need to take care of. So that's my attempt to rein it back in from the Somalian ghettos.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So we've been going at it for about 2 hours. So how about we do a final round of thoughts and then we'll close it down. Whoever wants to start.
Well, I've been thinking while you guys are talking um, that you guys have a lot of wisdom that you know is valuable to the rest of us, and everybody's from different areas, different age brackets, stuff like that. I think I'm the oldest one here, I'm sure, and I really value what some of like what Gray was saying. He's the youngest, and I've actually been thinking lately. I've been thinking during our conversation about what could you implement, what could we each implement in our own lives to kind of combat the struggles that we're talking about. And one thing I've been thinking personally is kind of weird because I'm the oldest, but I met a guy through the corner actually that is a little bit older than me, and I've been thinking about asking him, "Hey man, can you like mentor me a little bit?" 'Cause he's had multiple kids and they're a little bit older. He's probably about 10 years older than me, and his kids are 10 years older. He's been there. Um, and that's just something I thought about, like, or can we enter like a more intentional relationship of like, I call you, you help me out, give me your advice, whatever. Uh, I trust what he's been through, and kind of man, he seems to be. And I wonder if that's something. He's local to me too, so that's a little different than this call or anything. But I wonder if that could be something that we each could do that would be of value to us individually, because it's too variable. Like my kids are different than everybody else's kids, etc. You need somebody that knows the story to speak into it. I don't know. That's just something I've been thinking.
No, that's great. I use the corner for that all the time. I mean, there's a lot of these guys that I send lengthy messages to explaining in detail problems I'm having in my family that I don't talk about online and just see what they have to say. And
And it's useful.
yeah, it's super useful. And I think it's because I mean, obviously, if nothing else, it's almost like I have a pretty broad understanding of prayer and of communion and confession. And so I just, like, if I send a message to Neil or something about something that's going on in my family, I just take it as all that. And they have greater context for what's going on in my life, and people pray for me. And I mean, this is a little bit of, um, TLC is a little, I mean, that is a little bit of what I was talking about in my pitch. I think it's, there's all these negative aspects of technology, but a lot of that is in how we're using it. And I think there can be a lot of great positive things about that because that is, I mean, what do you do when like the body of the culture has broken down to some degree? We got to Frankenstein our own, you know? Plus Frankenstein was, I mean, who's the real monster in that? Let's be honest.
Well, and this is good because, like Nick says, I think that is important as you're sitting on the edge of your bed asking that question. Sometimes it's good to have some encouragement, someone to talk to, pray with you about that when you're like, well, I sat on the edge of my bed. I asked the question, but I don't know about doing that or whatever the thing is. Um, so it's good to have that encouragement.
and potentially be that encouragement to the next guy.
Yeah, I guess I can go, and I would respond to what you guys said by I think um I I had my we had the last conversation, Jordan, Annie, and I last week. I really should have posted it today. Um, Annie's like such a classic teacher. She's like, "When are you going to post that?" I'm like, "I don't know. When I have time." But Jordan made this really great point about how in a proper community, um, well, essentially, you could boil it down to like in a proper community, nobody has to be everybody to anybody. Um, in the sense, he used the example of like, let's say Neil lives down the street from me, and Neil's daughter is 9 years older than my daughter. So when she's 16, my daughter will be 7, and rather than my wife and I completely carrying the burden, not that it's a burden, but carrying the burden of whatever my daughter's schedule is all day, every day. Maybe there's on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, Neil's daughter, not for money, not like a paid babysitting service, but maybe like part of her role in the community is coming and spending time with my daughter and helping usher her into like the next years of her life, like from the perspective of a 16-year-old, which is necessarily different than my wife's perspective. And it also plays the function of Jordan's point, like helping usher Neil's daughter into like womanhood and being a mother and being ready to potentially be a mother, before the age of 35, like actually being ready. And that really struck me because, uh, and to relate it to what you guys just said is like, I think one of the things I took from Peterson that's been like most practically, uh, helpful in my life and just in my understanding is that concept of the zone of proximal development. Um, because it's helped me understand when I was a young coach, especially, I still am a young coach, but when I was like 23 and I just stopped playing and I was starting coaching and I'm coaching guys that are like 4 years younger than me. And I'm like, dude, some of these guys are my teammates. Many of them I competed against. Like, I had a 5 whiskey cokes to that guy last Friday, and now I'm supposed to have like authority in his life. But that zone of proximal development helped me understand, like, actually, I have something really unique that I can do for this guy that's 18 when I'm 23 that my coach who's 35 can't do. Which is I was him 4 years ago, which is long enough, like close enough that I can remember what that was like, and I can remember my mistakes very clearly. I can remember the things I did well very clearly, and I think it's important. TLC. What the coolest thing about this group, like you said, Zep, is um, that there's guys of literally on this call probably like every there's probably not a gap between my age to your age that's more than like 5 to 7 years um, between the 8 of us. And so it feels like there's because TLC has such a wide range, um, it just feels like there's the potential to have that kind of zone of proximal development kind of relationship, no matter where you're at, um, whether you have young kids, older kids, all these things. And so uh, I definitely, appreciate you guys being here and including me in this. Neil, thank you for initiating. And I mean, none of you should be surprised if I reach out and have questions because I am just getting started and you guys all have a ton of wisdom. I know everybody would be quick to point to their mistakes, but yeah, I just know by the fact that all of you guys are here and that you have decided to direct your attention to the TLC, that says enough for me to value your experience and what you have to say. And it definitely makes me feel, um, I don't know what the word is, better just generally to know that like I don't just have the resources because frankly, like and this would be a much longer diatribe, but like my church, I don't have anybody I can go to at my church, or like in my embodied community that I feel, um, well, to go back to Dan's initial pitch, like I don't know that I have anybody. I know for a fact actually that I don't have anybody here who actually can read the culture and like read what's going on. And when I have conversations with older men, oftentimes I feel like, and I don't mean this in a prideful way, but I feel like I can say something that might illuminate their understanding for what's going on, and rarely does it happen for me the other way around. Um, and so I just really appreciate that there's some older men I can turn to, just in friendship and conversation, even like this. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I'm with you, Gray. I'm really with you. Several times tonight, I've been thinking something, and you've kind of said something along the same lines. So one thing I'll kind of call back to, you mentioned like, what's the thing right now that we're going to be like, oh, we missed it, so obvious. And I think there's probably a few answers to that. And I could go on a long time, so I won't. But the one that I'll kind of comment on it is I think that we're not far from a time where we look back and we go like, oh, yeah, we needed to start building community a long time ago. And we were saying that then, but we didn't actually know what it meant yet because we hadn't seen the deleterious effects of needing it and not having it. You know what I mean? Like even right now, this is great. Like we're talking kind of hypothetical. Like yeah, like because I feel the same way as you. Like my real life community, like um, there's a certain disconnect. That's a frustration for me. But on the bright side, like we're not currently in an emergency. You know what I mean? Um, so I think it's like the time to figure out what you're going to do isn't in the emergency. you know. Now that said, none of us has a crystal ball, and so I mean, how do you prepare for the unexpected? You know what I mean? Like you can kind of run scenarios where like this is somewhat likely or this is somewhat likely. You can kind of do it like, yeah, exactly. Like I'm okay with people laughing at me for building an ark in the desert. I am. But I'm I'm also not a talented enough ark builder to build one myself. So I think part of what I'm trying to figure out is like how to how to get people's attention, how to kind of like make those connections. Um, uh, I find sometimes when you bring up when I've tried to in the past, I haven't had a lot of success, and I've kind of got shut down a couple different ways. Like one, people are just like in a real friendly way, like, "Oh, that's great, bro," like yeah, just kind of like a friendly, generically Christian, like I'm gonna affirm you, but like I really don't know what you're talking about. So that's one version, right? And then the other is we're like, oh yeah, like you're acting under a spirit of fear. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, sometimes maybe like I have to examine my heart, and maybe I am, and I just need to repent of that. But also, I think it's possible to kind of flippantly operate under a spirit of naivety, or to say like just because like the default state of things due to entropy is not everything works. But we tend to think like if you've been in an environment in which everything works, you think that things just naturally work. You know what I mean? Um, but that's actually wrong. So I think like very practically speaking, like forging community, figuring out what that even means, having proactive conversations with other parents to say like, look, we all want our kids to like us. We want to be in good terms. Like if we have a certain amount of solidarity on certain things, it's going to go a massive long way. But we have to all take it seriously. You know what I mean? Because like we don't want to close our kids off, right? But we also, don't want them getting into God knows what on the internet at someone's house because it's like really unsupervised or whatever. Like for example, so like that's the thing that we just have to have conversations about and not have it be like, wait, they did what? Like because we know the parents and we've already talked about it. So like I think that's kind of a practical thing, and piggybacking off of what Jordan was saying, like, yeah, like nobody can do everything. So you have to know your community in the first place. And like when you need the thing or you have the question and it's like specific or whatever, oh, I'm going to call Nick, because he knows about Somalis and I just don't. You know what I mean? Like, uh, but yeah, like hitting aside, we got to know our community. We have to develop competence. We have to be okay with leaning on each other and just kind of like put it out there. um, yeah, that we're not an island unto ourselves, and like we're right, we're having to undo like a lot
You're
of
you're gonna know we have community, Dan, when our kids start marrying each other.
yeah, right,
That's
yeah,
when we got community.
that's a beautiful thing. Yeah,
Then
and yeah.
I was already trying to arrange marriages before we started recording. I didn't get any takers.
Put an offer on the table,
I I have wondered like I keep waiting for like a New York Times article that says like this Gen Z kid told their parents, whoever you set me up with, I'll marry. Because
My pastor he wrote a dating book, and so of course this is like a marketing scheme. So there was a lot of negative to it, but he did it. He did an arranged marriage, and he essentially like not auctioned it off via Instagram, but like posted on Instagram, was like apply if you want to, and he picked two people and arranged the marriage, and they got married 4 months after he introduced them.
Wow.
And he was doing it essentially to prove the point of, like, in the book he makes the case that, of course, also the book was ghostwritten, so he didn't write it himself.
but I do think a pendulum is swinging though. Like
Yeah,
younger
yeah,
generations are looking at like I don't want to scroll through any more dating apps. Like I see these people in my life who are older than me. I trust them. Like hand it off. It can't be any worse than that. I'm not saying that'll ever be the norm. I can just see it being like enough of a thing to where it gets to be a New York Times article.
I wonder if the
Um,
Mormons do that. I don't know, but I feel like the Mormons have
They
great
the
marriages.
shadow matriarchies kept doing this in the upper middle classes, and like it's not, it still happens. It's
Hmm.
just not
right.
explicit. And I live
Yeah.
in a small enough town, and I went to the high school with like how many people were like, "Oh, they're a good son and they're a good family," and like, "Oh, this would you should talk to." I mean, that stuff's it's not arranged, but like I was talking to a girl, like my wife was talking to a girl that we graduated high school with that she was friends with growing up, neighbor. And she's like, I don't know what's come over me. And her son was like in sixth grade. But I'm sitting here thinking about which daughter I want my son to marry.
Yeah.
Like she just came out and said it,
Yeah.
So it's like on that point, on that.
I mean like the we can learn from the Somalis, you know? Like they really have this down.
Well, you mentioned LDS. I have to talk about LDS. Uh, since I befriended a bunch of missionaries a few years back and have stayed friends with several of them. Um, I mean, they have a lot of cultural rails for that aspect of their life. Like you go on a mission, maybe you start college, but then you take that 2 year break, you go on the mission. It's super hard. It's like religious military. It's the hardest thing that most of them will do for their whole life. You get home, you now have the badge of return missionary. Now it's like now you get married. Now you're marryable material. And many of them are like engaged pretty quick and married pretty quick. And I mean, it looks like that seems like a nice track for people to be on. I think getting married young is a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've got ample topics to cover in subsequent conversations. But yeah, um, I think TLC as a community is only sustainable that it goes cross generations. But we already have multiple generations within this space, so we already have the framework in place for that. So it's a very strange thing, and it's a very strange time. Um, yeah. Any
Can I
final
share?
closing thoughts?
Yeah, I had
Oh,
some.
oh, go ahead, Christian.
Uh, Finding those people that in to have mentor relationships with, and what are we doing? Like, it's not. Peugeot says symbolism happens, and it's not. You know, Peterson called this thing the arc for a reason, and it's related to the meaning crisis. And we joke about it, but and it's like, oh well, that's this big abstract, far off thing. But I mean, Dan, like I totally think that you're on that. That's it's like, well, I've tried to start some conversations, and a person that was supposed to be here tonight, Corey, he's talked a lot about authority, and like I've made the pitch at one point, not in an estuary, but it's like a lot of people talking in these spaces should consider going to seminary because it would, and as I'm listening to hear you talk, not because maybe you'll be the preacher or you get this frame of like your mega church pastor, like that's all whatever, but it's like uh to be like you might would be ready to do something and talk about building up competence and like it's like aiming at something that has a directed goal that then actually offers you authority as a as that result of that achievement. And it wouldn't be crazy for you to talk about, starting some kind of church community, um, and uh, it with that authority. And you can do it part time, and it might take you 5 years or whatever, building competence. But like, I really think that that's a um, not a bad idea for people to consider, and not because you might be like a full-time pastor, but because you could be ready and it gives you authority to, like as much as we want to, I mean, talk about wanting to be anarchists and credentialing and all this kind of stuff, like there's just something to be said. I can't, who was just talking about, well, you're talking about competence, um, and then the, the other piece of it, which goes to the corner, is it okay if I share a clip to close this down? Is that okay?
I think so. I sort of trust you. So yeah,
Okay, it's
go ahead.
Chris Williamson. It's not.
Okay.
I had a couple more Somali references, but I can save them for later.
No, let's close out
All
with some
right.
manosphere. That's just as good as
Yeah.
this Somali racism.
What is that
Yeah, fine.
hairstyle called? The
The broccoli.
the or the muffin top?
Chris
Yeah, it's
Williamson
like
had
I
that
don't
on the
know.
top for sure.
Crap. But this
Oh,
Don't
freaking
forget to
I
share
love John.
audio.
what?
Dude, John Bellion's amazing. He's got the
For
best voice ever.
for the record, I respect the hustle.
Uh, it's basically about TLC. I'm getting there, guys.
Hope you're
Here
gonna
it is.
deliver on this because I'm actually excited.
All right.
Don't let Gray down.
Is it
I,
working?
Audio is no
No
audio.
audio.
Why doesn't it not work? I don't know why it doesn't work. Screen
that's
sharing audio. It may not work. I mean, I can hear it. Maybe it's because I need like my,
Probably because it's going through your ear.
well, uh, yeah, that's probably why. Um, yeah, so I'll just read it from here. What's the temptation for a guy at your top level talking about to Chris Williamson? The conversation of having podcasting content. What's it like on the daily temptation? Like, I know I could blow the door open on this. And what's your content? Well, would be the most big platform with hardcore tribal audiences. Okay. He's basically asking him, like, how do you limit yourself? How do you really follow your gut? How do you not just like yield to wanting to do, which I'm sure he's done a lot of making his show great with almost, every aspect. But he said, uh, like hardcore tribal audiences are built together over the mutual hatred of an out group, not the mutual love of an in group. I guess it's having a he's basically saying he tries to model like he's talking about being for something versus against something, and it would be more powerful if you could hear him say it, but uh, that this is the and Neil, and the reason I wanted to share it with Neil's because I feel like he exemplifies this so well, but like, and we can stop. I don't know how to stop share. It's not come. My thing's not come together as well as I wish it would, but that that this is like this is what this is for. That this is what the correct aim and the telos is. It is for the in group. Like it's not for the it's not for to posture of the out group. It is for like the cultivation of the in group. And he said that cults are actually built around what they're against, and that strong communities are built around what they're for. And so, as far as the two pitches were for, go to seminary or something and gain some authority or competence so that you can create an arc uh, in a certain way, possibly, and then also um, that this is the on the digital side of the digital arc. Like this is like a digital arc. So
I'll do a third pitch, something that helped me immensely in my darkest time, but I still do it. Um, have 1 hour a week of prayer in some way, shape, or form. Now, within the Catholic tradition, it's very easy because we have something called Eucharistic adoration. But just having that 1 hour prayer and going through all the roles. Okay, how am I doing as a husband? How am I doing as a father? How am I doing in my church? How am I doing in my job? How am I doing? And doing that examination immensely helpful. Like, and yeah, so that's something I want to volunteer to anyone who's in a new frame of reference. So that would be a new father, new job, new like that's when it's particularly essential, the new frame of reference. So anyway, that's my closing pitch. This was awesome, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
We'll do it again.
Thanks, Neil.
All right, hang out.
Peace.
All right.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Bye, guys.
Bye.